Got Todd McShay on a Monday again. I think we're going to do a lot of college ball today, but we'll see what other NFL stuff that he wants to do. Let's just start with the headliner, man. Bama, huge lead. Georgia comes all the way back. Bama pulls it out. The headline from that game for you is what?
I think it was Jalen Milroe's. He arrived. We knew what we saw flashes of what he was as an athlete last year, how explosive he can be. We saw the deep ball, how beautiful a deep ball he can throw. We saw the improvement after getting benched for the game last year and just like the mental toughness that he had. This year, start off the year, they've looked good. But to see him do this against, it was a record-setting performance in terms of doing it against an AP top 5 opponent, throwing the football, throwing with anticipation, throwing with the ball placement that he had, and having just not shy at all in terms of his ability to take off and run and knowing when to do it, how to extend plays. It was as complete a game as you could ask for. Now you say kind of they shut it down in the second half a little bit, but like that first half is as good a half as I can remember a quarterback having in recent college football. So dynamic, so explosive against a defense that typically is so disciplined. His ability to get the outside, like George is always great at setting a hard edge and forcing guys inside. It was too much speed for them, and to make some of the throws down the field. And then even when, Georgia makes the big comeback and then, 13 or 17 seconds they had the lead because of one play, the throw he makes, and obviously the stories of Ryan Williams and the catch he makes and doing, just things that 17-year-olds should not be able to do. But Jalen Milroe was the story for me. And, we could start talking about, is he QB1 for the 2025 draft? We can start talking about, is he the leader in the clubhouse right now for the Heisman? But forget all of that. Like if you're an Alabama fan waking up and kind of assessing the situation, we've got the guy in college football right now is my mindset.
I can't believe you just mentioned Milroe as potentially QB1 for the 25 draft.
Yeah, we'll get to it. And it might not be on your podcast. And, we may have to do it some other places. But
well, everybody knows that I'm not the biggest Milroe fan, and I haven't been for a while.
And I'm not saying he is QB1. Right. I'm saying that you wake up Sunday morning, and here we are Monday morning, and you start looking at it and say, you know what? Like we're starting the quarterback, and I don't want to go on a long thing here, but quarterback development is different than it used to be. What you're looking for in a quarterback at the college level is different than what it used to be. The emphasis on the ability to create and having the ability to create big plays with your legs and driving the ball down the field. We've seen quarterbacks like Josh Allen. We've seen quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts. We've seen quarterbacks come in. We've seen it, we've seen it across the league in recent years. Lamar Jackson today isn't what Lamar Jackson was the first 2 years. So you're seeing these quarterbacks, they don't have to be completed prospects or projects. They've got to have something that's a special, unique trait. Josh Allen has it. Jalen Milroe had we saw the improvement he made from college to the NFL. Lamar Jackson has it. So even though he's not ready in terms of the mechanics and consistency and the ball placement and decisions, a total package yet, he has things that a lot of guys can't do. So when we start talking about Shedeur Sanders and how great he's playing at Colorado, when we start talking about Carson Beck, was he anointed too early on what basis for being the number one quarterback coming into this year for 2025 draft? When you start talking about Quinn Ewers before the injury and the improvement, why can't we throw Jalen Milroe into that discussion? That's as far as I'll go today, but I think it's something that we have to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, my position would be that there was just like the job of quarterback in that Michigan game where you just needed him to be more on top of things. And you want to tell me that's not who he is anymore, and it's proven against Georgia, okay, maybe. I think he's the best running quarterback in college football. It's not just his straight line speed. The way he accelerates into these turns, or even Georgia, this defensive group thinks they have the angle on a running quarterback. And it's like, actually, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of it is entirely special. I always felt like the deep ball was just a deep ball throw and please somebody go get it. I think one of the coolest things about the first half is, and it's going to sound like I'm not giving Milroe enough credit, and that's fine, but I thought they were scheming up things where these throws were wide open too. And
Yeah.
but to his credit, he was smart enough to know where it was like, let me take this throw instead of what I thought last year was his kind of default was he either ran or he threw it 50 yards down the sideline, hoping for like Burton to make a play. And more often than not, like Burton came up with it because I thought he was a really good college receiver last year. So let's look to the other side because I think the Beck tape is
real
so
quick,
bad.
Like, you just mentioned it, so I just want to kind of put a bow on it.
Sure.
I don't think we give Kalen DeBoer enough credit. Like offensively, getting the most out of Michael Penix and what we saw from him, the transition of what Penix was at Indiana versus Washington, what Jalen Milroe was last year, what we're seeing this year. And there's a lot to it, but I'll say this: if you're a football fan watching at home, like watch the amount of motions and the effectiveness of the pre-snap motions. The clarity that he's able to create with those motions and the offensive, the personnel packages and the alignments, but specifically the motions, the clarity he creates for the quarterback, the launch points that he creates for the receivers, and the confusion that these motions present to the defense. That is a big element of why Kalen DeBoer has had successful quarterbacks, successful offenses, and it was a big element of why Alabama had so much success on Saturday night, and why what you're seeing the finished product, right? The wide open receivers, easy throws, just decisive quarterbacking. Well, how did they get there? Go back and really study those pre-snap motions and some of their alignments and some of their formations. They orchestrate a lot of that, and Kalen DeBoer deserves a lot of credit for that.
My favorite part maybe for DeBoer is just that, who knows what Georgia ends up being, because we're going to get to the Georgia part of this here very quickly. But as I'm watching that game, I'm going, okay, well, the cool thing for DeBoer is, post Saban, we know how hard it's going to be. And it's like if Georgia had come in there and put it on Alabama on a Saturday night where look, there's a lot of, I've been to that stadium a bunch of times, and that stadium is so spoiled, they can be over it a little quicker.
No question.
That was not the case. That was not the case on Saturday night. A couple different people that were boots on the ground in there being like, this is the craziest I've ever seen Bryant Denny. And I'm thinking like, dude, you've been 10 times, this is the craziest. And they were up for it. And then of course they had to remain up for it because they blow the lead and the whole thing. So on the flip side, like part of me was happy for DeBoer because if you had blown that game being up 28-0 with everything that's on the line, then it turns into probably an unfair freak out. So it's kind of just nice that he has that one in his back pocket. Let's talk about Beck, because I think the film from this is so bad, it's going to be hard for some teams to get over, even if he lights it up the rest of the way.
Well, we talked about it last week, right? And I mentioned we didn't dive into it. We don't have to do a deep dive. It's pretty simple. I mentioned what I was seeing on the tape, talking to a couple NFL scouts, and to try to simplify it, just study the receivers on the receiving end of Carson Beck's throws. Watch how much work they have to do. That's the big difference. I think his ball placement and accuracy, he's in control. His mental toughness has never been more on display than it was the other night. Let's give some credit here. It is real easy to go in the tank as a quarterback after you make those mistakes, dealing with that pressure, 3 quarters in the humidity, everything's going wrong. Your receivers, by the way, I want to get to the receivers in a minute. The receivers are not making plays, they're not separating, and so all of a sudden, to be able to hang in there mentally, there's a lot to love there. But if you're studying him just as a quarterback prospect, and you're going back and studying that tape, and go back and study last year's tape and even early this year, the ball placement is not at that level when you're starting to talk about a quarterback as potentially QB1 in 2025. Receivers working for it, missing within the strike zone. And so that's the area he's going to have to improve in. And then under pressure, some of the decisions and the mistakes, just not up to that level. it is a damning first half and 2.5 quarters of tape for him. And it's something he's going to have to overcome the rest of the season, because it just, instead of going out there and at least playing at the same level for 4 quarters, or maybe like answering some questions about his ball placement and how hard his receivers have to work, he went and he just handed on a platter to NFL scouts what they were already thinking about him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just didn't know if that many people thought he was. I mean, he had 3 picks. He could have had 5.
Yeah.
He was not seeing things, and then for a long stretch, I was okay. I think he's like shook up here. So I don't know. I don't know if the scouts are going to go, that was really, really alarming, or you go, hey, road game in Tuscaloosa on a Saturday night, give them credit for coming back and competing. I mean, the fact that they, imagine if we're sitting here talking about them winning the game. Like, are we allowed to make any of these points about Beck?
Oh, I just think for somebody like, that doesn't change.
Well, you should have.
The tape's the tape.
Yeah. It like that one deep throw that he had to the left side after he'd already thrown a pick, and you're like, what are you looking at? And some of the big completions that he was getting later on, I don't even know. Maybe I give him credit for those. He had 2 in a double coverage with the safety coming over. I think one was completed, one was incomplete. And I don't know if I give him credit, because like, should I give him credit for being that aggressive, being down and being like, hey, you know what? Like, I hope my guy makes the play, and he didn't get burned on either of those. So part of me likes that he was aggressive. But then when you combine that to so many of the throws earlier on, I'm like, what the hell is he looking at? Does he not see the linebacker underneath? Does he not see that guy outside of that route? Was he just throwing, not caring about the safety coming over and closing on a sideline shot? I don't know. I don't know the answers to that, other than it just was messy, man.
I'll tell you the biggest concern I have for Georgia moving forward. And like, I'm not one of those Monday morning alarmists, and like, they should only drop a few spots. Like the second half, what they were able to pull out, like, if I'm a coach, Kirby Smart has so much to work with in terms of here, like, it's so clear cut. Here's where we have to improve. You got, like, if you guys don't listen to us as coaches now, like what we saw in the first half, we're going to see more of that down the road in big spots. And number 2 is, I am so damn proud of you. Like, this is the effort. This is the culture. This is what we've built here at Georgia. Like, so it's like, from a coaching standpoint, and Georgia can probably lose another game and still wind up in the college football playoff. So, like, from a coaching standpoint, it's not the worst thing in the world to have to wake up on Sunday morning and say, all right, these are my circumstances. But from a big picture standpoint, just stepping back and looking at personnel, where's Georgia's difference makers offensively? That was my biggest takeaway. Like, Carson Beck, yes, like all the things we just talked about, but it's not all Carson Beck. Alabama played a lot of man-to-man coverage. Georgia's receivers just didn't win their one-on-ones. And this isn't something new. Like, in recent years, like they had Ladd McConkey, not an elite receiver, not a huge game breaker all the time, but a very consistent player, a difference maker, and faster and more explosive than people thought. But like, you could rely on him. Let's put it that way. They obviously, like, their tight ends have been outstanding, none better than Brock Bowers. So they've always had the guys they can rely on in big situations. Who are those guys this year? I look at it and it's scary to me. Now, systemically, like, big picture, who wants to go, if you're recruiting, who wants to go to Georgia? George Pickens was disgruntled. He's always going to be, that's who he is. But he wasn't happy with what was going on there. A.D. Mitchell transferred. Jermaine Burton transferred. Wide receivers don't love this offense, period. They'd much rather go to Ohio State, to LSU, to Alabama. Like, Ohio State, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Smith and Jigba, even Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka, Jeremiah Smith now. Alabama, you go back to that 4 group that was sensational, kind of kicked things off with Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, Waddle. Mechie was after that with Jamison Williams. Now Ryan Williams. LSU, you started to go back to all the way to OBJ and Jarvis Landry, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, and now even like Hiram Lacey and Aaron Anderson. And now even Texas, too. So you can throw Texas in as the 4th one with Sark. So it's only recently receivers want to go play there. So that's 4 programs in the country where the elite of the elite are. That's my home if I'm a top prospect of wide receiver. Who's going to Georgia? And that's like, to me, for as great as they are on both sides of the ball at every position, quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, defensive back, tight ends, they can recruit running backs, they can recruit all of those positions at the elite, like the highest level. But wide receiver, for the first time, we're seeing, we've always known it hasn't been elite, but for the first time we're seeing, this is like a major personnel flaw for Georgia.